Okay, so we've got our terrain chunked into tiles, and we've used World Streamer to essentially stream in all these scenes. So all the tiles have got their own scene, and that's being loaded in. The chunked scene, once it loads, is the one with the World Streamer scene splitter. It's got these layers. Each one of those contains either the terrain. I mentioned I probably should have moved the water, made that part of here, made it on its own layer, maybe with some other I guess fairly big items, maybe cliffs. You know, if I'd had mesh cliffs, probably would have included them on a layer. But anyway, so I've got that. But the main thing in our streaming test that we've done or haven't done so far is we haven't included Vegetation Studio foliage, the trees, the grass. So we're happy with streaming without visible lags, or kind of perceptible lags. It is still having a little bit of a hiccup as it's loading things in, but it's okay, manageable. It's not kind of causing too much of a problem. Certainly as I'm playing it, it's not something I can feel as a player. I can only see it when I'm looking at the profiler. So now we want to add our vegetation. We had our work scene, I think it was in the work scene that we added the vegetation, and we created the vegetation package. So if you remember, it was here, our meadow test 2. So that included all the foliage, and it's got the terrains for our the textures for our terrain, and all the rules for when things should appear. There's a couple of ways now to handle the multi-terrain part. You could, and I've tried this in the past, have essentially a pool of these vegetation systems, and not the manager but the actual systems that you get on individual terrains. Let's open the work scene, that'll make more sense. So this vegetation system is connected literally to, we happen to have one terrain here in the lives here, that's the one that's connected up, but Vegetation Studio can deal with multiple terrains. It just adds another vegetation system for each one. They get connected up. But you can do some one of the things you can do is, as the tiles are being loaded in, so in your play scene, actually let me throw that in because that's a useful one to be able to get back to. In your play scene, as each of these tiles are being loaded in, you can have a pool of, literally it would be 9 or 10 actually, or 9 or 10 vegetation systems that get added to each active terrain as they're coming in to play. I tried that. It wasn't quite, it was recommended to me by someone. I'm happy to show you how that's done if someone is interested, but actually what I found is easiest is to just add them manually. I've got a script that's going to help us do that, but to actually add on each of these terrains within each, within the splits that the World Streamer layers have created, so they'll become essentially part of the terrain and will be saved as part of the scene. To add the vegetation system there, and then to bake, so using the persistent storage that Vegetation Studio allows. The benefit of baking, I guess you can do it on the, so not on them on here, you could just literally go, so on this vegetation system down at the bottom you get your persistent storage. So you create a persistent storage asset, just as we did before. You would go, actually it makes it easier for you to see it from here. So you create persistent vegetation storage package, and then to add that, you then add it back into as an asset into here, and then you can literally just go through and currently we've got no stored vegetation, but you just bake the vegetation. It's not going to let me because it's saying you've got to add a package, persistent vegetation package, into that settings slot. But once it's there, you would have an option to bake. So you click on, if I let me set one up, I can always remove it. So what am I looking for? Create persistent vegetation. So I've got temp. I'm going to delete it. I think sometimes it's easier to explain something by showing. So in the settings, drag it in. So do you want to initialize it? Yeah. So it knows now this is what came in from the main package. It's loaded them in. If you can, this first button would only do this item. That's that rule set. Bake all vegetation items would be all of, you know, everything that's included. And then having done that, it actually sets each of the items to it disables the runtime spawn. So it no longer on runtime, as the scene loads, it doesn't pick up this prefab, runs through all this list of what's going on, where it needs to appear, all the rules, which you can imagine takes time. So instead of doing that, you bake all the assets, all their rules, their placements. There is also the other benefit of doing it that way is once it's done that way, you can also manually delete and add individual items. It becomes more of a manual process. I find these rules are really great for the initial pass, and then having baked it, you can then just kind of tweak things and make things exactly as you want them. You know, sometimes the rules don't quite follow what you've got in your head, what you want it to look like. So it's two benefits then of these persistent storage is you're not spending the time on scene load, and as I've been saying, that's the most important thing. Every time that one of those tiles loads, you want it to be as efficient and as fast as possible. The downside is that it's using extra storage. Obviously it's saving all of that inside these packages, or in our case it's a single package here. So let me delete the reference to that package, because what we don't want to do is to have it on this single terrain. That's actually of no use to us. Okay, it's just the editor kind of slightly complaining about things, and then I'm going to delete that because it's just a temp. So I've got a folder which I've set up, which is the bake folder. I'm just currently have empty. I'm going to go into my chunked scene. So if you remember, that's where we've got all the terrain tiles. And in awesome technology, so I've written this script. The default comes with, so default Vegetation Studio asset comes with this vegetation system tool window, which essentially enables just it automatically adds a vegetation system to every terrain in the scene. Actually, let me open the window and you'll see what I mean. So you can give it a prefab, so you could set up a vegetation system and give it the package that you want it to use, and then it would automatically add that to every terrain. But the problem is that's not baked. That's just on every terrain in the scene, on load it would initialize, run through the rule sets. It was kind of working. I kind of used that, and it was working for my initial tests in the pooling of the systems, but as I say, I was still having kind of lags spikes on load. So I took the script and I added some extra functionality, which is essentially a baking feature. So it's going to not only add the vegetation system component, but it's going to add a persistent storage package, and it's going to bake it for every single tile. Stops you having to do it manually. I've done it once manually and it took hours, days actually, and having done that, I've just taught myself how to write some editor scripting, I guess, using the existing script that was there and just messing around with the API. So how to set it up, obviously I'll make that as long as the developer is okay with me sharing it, I'll make that available. And the way it works is, as with his original, you can set up a parent object, so it will only deal with terrains in that parent object, but actually ours are all well, not actually in the root, but they're nested inside here. We essentially, I want it to go through the whole of the scene, deal with any terrain it finds. So I'm going to leave that empty. Then it's asking for a vegetation package to be added. That's our package that we built. Let me double check that I've got the right one though. Oh yeah, sorry, that's a folder. That's the one that we've been working on. Now, a little tip, make a copy, because after running the bake, as I mentioned, it then goes through each of these and sets their status to don't activate at runtime. So it's useful to have a version that you can fall back on. Saves you having to click on each one and set it to being enabled at runtime. Drag that in, and then that's it. Now, before I press the there is a rebake all option as well, which essentially, once you've done this process once and each terrain has a vegetation system on it with baked assets, you can rebake all of them in one go after you made some changes, but we need to set it up first, so let's do this one first. But before I click on this set vegetation system and bake all, it takes a while, and the amount of time depends on how many terrains are involved and how many vegetation items are involved. I'm kind of finding it taking between, so on a scene like this, I'm expecting this is going to take probably 6 to 8 hours. It wouldn't surprise me. So I tend to run it overnight. So I'm going to press set up and bake all now. I'll pause the video and pick it up again tomorrow, and we'll see the results. But what we're expecting to see is, on every single, having done, once it's finished its work, on each of these there'll now be a vegetation system added, because currently all we have is the Vegetation Studio Manager. Remember, I deleted the default vegetation system from inside. They'll now be added to inside here, and in our bake test folder there'll be a big lot, well, there'll be 256, one for each one, 256 persistent, where are they? Persistent vegetation storage packages, one for each of the terrains. I think that's about all you need to know before I press bake and sign off for now. I'm trying to think if there's no. I'll do a last save. Yeah, okay. Yeah, once it goes, and as I said, it doesn't tell you how long it's going to take. I guess that's it. That's the other part of the waiting process, is you'll see the initial run goes you know, if you've got the time to watch it, it'll show you as it's adding everything and passing all the items, and then after it's done all of that, although the items are all, you know, they appear, all these persistent packages appear, if you look at them in your Windows Explorer in the folder, they're all like very small in size, like 1 kilobyte, 5 kilobytes. It's essentially, it seems to be that somewhere on your system it's caching all the data that it needs, and it takes an awful lot of time for the data to move from the cache to the actual project, it seems, because it runs through the process and seems to have kind of finished, and then just feels as if it's hanging, nothing happens. And if you look in your you know, if you look in Task Manager, you'll see the Unity editor is showing as not responding. Don't believe it, it's working, it's just stalled, or kind of the interface with you has stalled, but it's still working in the background, and it does after that period of about, you know, depending on the materials that you've got, between 6 and 8 hours, well then suddenly just like everything will appear. So I'll try to show you some of that, and it's hard because literally the time scales involved. I'll try to show you some of what is going on. So I'll press that, and obviously because it's going to take a long time, I'll give you a warning. Are you sure you want to do it? Yeah, I'm good. And so off it goes, and as I say, it'll keep doing that until it's run through each of all of the vegetation items for each of the terrains, and then nothing will feel as if it's happening in the editor. It'll feel like it's hung, and nothing will really have changed. Can't even remember whether in fact this folder will fill up, and it will fill up in your Windows Explorer, but I'm not sure the Unity editor updates that yet. Pretty sure it doesn't update the terrains with the vegetation system until it finally then copies everything over from the cache into the project, and then the scene will become dirty, so you'll have that little star next to the name, and then you'll know, okay, I'm good to go, that's done, and then you save and everything seems to come into place. So I'll leave it at that for now and let it run its course. Okay, so it's still running. It's not been that long actually, it's 10 minutes if that, and so in that folder that I mentioned, you can see them kind of coming in. 512 just finished. So now's the bit, it's the kind of the waiting game. How long is it going to take for it to go from the cache, because all of these are kind of showing as, yeah, so the basic asset is at 5k. Oh look, yeah, 5k, and then the meta obviously is just a tiny 1k. These, you'll know you're done when two things happen. The first bit is actually in the editor itself, so nothing's showing, although you know that they're there because you can see them in your you know, in your folder. So essentially the editor feels as if it's hung on this window. The button's still pressed in, still black as when you clicked and started the process. When the process is done, it'll become normal grey again, it'll depress. So once that's done, but also once you've kind of saved the scene, now all of these will suddenly, you'll see they'll update and they'll show as actually having proper data in them, i.e. all the assets, their placement, all the trees, flowers, grass. And you're talking probably about, I don't know, well it depends, 12 meg, maybe less per package, depending on how many items of foliage you've got inside. So that's what I was talking about, this kind of waiting game, this kind of editor showing as status not responding. It's not responding, but it's still working away, and you can see that it's kind of changing its CPU usage and the memory being used. Just let it do its thing, don't turn it off. And as I said, kind of depends, depends on the number of terrains and the number of assets. Actually, I don't think this one's going to take too long. It might be 4 to 6 hours, but on really big, like 8K terrains with a lot of vegetation items, you're easily seeing 8 hours or more. So it's definitely an all-nighter. Sometimes run it for a day, come back. So that's what you're waiting on. You're waiting for this button to become grey again, and then you'll know your editor will become responsive again. And then you'll know you're good and all your packages have been baked. Okay, so good night's sleep later. Here we are, it's all done. I know it's finished because, as I was mentioning, the button is back to its normal upstate, the normal grey. What's appeared now in here is all the persistent storage assets for each of the terrains, and also in the hierarchy each of these now has childed to it a vegetation system. So if you click on the vegetation system, you'll notice by just going down to the bottom it has its associated storage. There's all the assets that have been baked. So that's all good. I'd recommend something I've found, it sometimes doesn't dirty the scene. So I mentioned that the star and then you save. So an easy way to do it is just to make one small change. I'm just happened to be in the directional light. Change it back to what it was, which is now, as I say, dirtied the scene. That means it's different from a save state, and then you can save your scene. And if you don't do that, you'll notice is that this is the folder that I was showing you before. These are the ones that were created. They're still all at 5K, 5 kilobytes. Once you save, let me try to, don't know if I can do both at the same time. No, maybe not. Save scenes. You'll notice now as it's kind of done its save, all of these have now moved to what they actually are. So we don't have that many vegetation items. They're not huge files, which is kind of good. It's that's what gets loaded with every terrain tile. So now I know I'm good to go. I've forced the save on the scene, which is made sure that everything is updated. Don't need that utility window anymore, but we now need to go back to our world streamer window. So if you remember, each of these, the terrain and the mesh, are on their separate terrain world streamer layers, and each one has been associated or turned into a scene. We need to regenerate these because the terrains now are different. So it's not the mesh layer, but it's this one. And the recommendation in kind of, if you update the scene content, you need to regenerate it. It does say click on S for slice again, so I'll do that. I personally don't always see the reason for it because the slices haven't changed, it's just their content, but I'll just do that anyway. And then G is the regenerate the scenes, which is important because the content of each of these, not the mesh one but the terrain one, which we're redoing now, has changed. It's now not just the terrain asset, but it's also has that child vegetation system associated with it. So we'll let it run through. Nearly there. Okay, and finally, just to double check, I'm just going to do a final save on this. It's just double check the actual scenes that have been exported. So I just pick one at random. I just want to check that my vegetation system is there. Yeah, that's great. So back to our place scene. I will move this water eventually. With our streamers, it's the same, so it's regenerated all the scenes, but actually it's the same prefab. You probably don't need to update it, but if you're worried about things, just you can drag it back in if you just want to make doubly sure. And again, if you've changed the terrain, so if all the grids have changed since the last time, you would want to go back into your build settings, possibly. So take all of the ones that you've changed. Where are we? You could go delete and assign them back in. There, they're back in. But actually, in our case, I would say that was probably an unnecessary step, simply because we hadn't changed the exact naming or number of the scenes. They were all exactly the same. It's just the content of the scenes that had changed. But you know, we've made sure. So let's have a look if it's working. We can try it in the editor. Obviously, as I mentioned, we're not going to get the full streaming, but we can just make sure that we're not getting any errors and it's loading our vegetation. Yeah, that's all good. So let's give it a go in a build. Save. Actually, before I do that, let's have a proper look at this. So you get to see the kind of what's going on. So we had a look at this before. So try to, with the ring streaming around, you can see the slightly lighter color is in the middle is the actual terrain tile, the one with the vegetation. So we are going to get that lag as the next terrain. Let me go a bit faster. There's the lag as the next terrain gets loaded. You could see it updating in here, and just so that you kind of see what's being loaded. So there's the meshes. So a bit way off. All the meshes around. I've got two, kind of 1 and 2, so kind of a ring of 2 sets of meshes, and then in the middle the actual terrain ones, which have their vegetation system and the baked items for the vegetation. So yes, that's all looking really good. Put that back. Let's do a build and check. I'm all good on that. So I want to build. I'm going to build up to a new folder. I'm going to call it VS Vegetation Studio. Save. So far we've got a decent 270. There's that loading, but no discernible lag as we're actually playing. It's not, so obviously it's updating yeah, it's kind of just playing through. I think we've got that case of, we can with some forest. We've got areas where we haven't got any of the grass, but to do with the terrain, I think. Let's go up to okay, so not sure why none of our trees were spawned here. We'll have to go and check why that is. And in general terms we've got, so yeah, same here. So this one hasn't got any trees being spawned. That's actually where I'm expecting most of the trees to be. Okay, so you're going to have to check that out in the editor, but otherwise we've got really good smooth kind of loading unloading of tiles. So what's going on? Where were we that we were looking for trees? So you notice that lag in the editor as things are loading. Where were we? Is it over the hill? I remember seeing the, oh, actually probably can see a dark patch over there. It's past the lake. Look, there's the load. Okay, so now in that place where is the dark patch where it should have trees. No, no. Some over there. I think I just overshot. Here we go. Yeah. Okay. So let's have a look in the scene. So I think the problem is actually pretty obvious. We're looking at what's been stored. We've got all of our grass, but none of our trees. Let's have a look up in here. tree. So we got 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But no trees. Odd. Okay. But if I select them, enable runtime, spawn has been disabled. Terrain texture rules. Use include texture rule, yeah, that's what I expected. So I think I will have to do a rebake. I mean, yeah, your other option is just to go through and add them manually, but I would expect them to have been included in the bake. I shall go and ask on the Discord and pick up from here. But in general terms, it's kind of working okay. It's just that the actual bake process seems to have missed out our trees. So I'll find out about that and I'll report back. Okay, so here's how I debug the problem of this missing foliage. And mostly the really apparent one was the trees, but also there were patches of grass that were missing, and it's as usual it's totally user error. It had to do with my settings. I baked in settings that just did not include that vegetation in those spots, and I'll show you how I worked it out. If I go back to where it is, I'm just looking for a spot where I know for sure. So there you are, just up here. There should have been trees. It's anywhere where there's that dark leafy texture on the ground, and I'm expecting to see trees, but none of those were baked. So how I debugged it, having got to the spot, if I select my first person player controller, so that just takes you where I'm expecting to be, then I can just click down essentially to select in the hierarchy which of the terrains we're dealing with, select its vegetation system. So these are the trees. Now everything's obviously been disabled, so now we want to be able to see it. We want to see what went wrong, so I'm going to re-enable at least one of the trees, but we're still not seeing it, and that's the reason it's not been baked, is because with our settings they're not being spawned. And I just went through and just had a look, you know, just checking the settings. So obviously I wanted to check that my texture rules were right, and yes, that's what I expected to be. And I noticed that this is only at 70, and I'd set that height because I didn't want any trees being spawned up into the hills, into the mountains. But actually, as I've worked out, that was way too low. The setting is actually 140. Now how did I do that? Well, first of all, how did I work out it was 140? We started at 70. I kind of, you know, went manually. I just went, okay, what happens if I put a lot? 200. I think I started noticing that some were appearing a bit higher than I need. Actually, that's not too bad. I don't mind it too much at 200. But what is that value? And it's actually a real world value within the Unity system. What I can do is in that scene, so if I select that scene, create a 3D object, select a cube, so it's defaulted to 0 to its origin, but I can right click, copy the component, the transform of my player, and go back to the cube, paste that in, paste component value. So that's move this cube where my player is, and you can literally, you know, just move it around. So I just moved it up and down. So that's 70, so that's okay. Where's my 140? So you can start kind of seeing, right, at 140, we're up here. Well, not quite where I expect it to be. It's going to get it. Paste component. So you would expect at 76 on that vegetation system. That will spawn right up to this point, and yes, you can see essentially where those, move my back into the distance, lift it up a bit. Let's make sure we're actually on the ground where we expect it to be. It's still not, it's not. Say for example we wanted it over there. Oh, I'm doing a terrible job of that. Oh. I'm moving way out into the distance, which is not where I want to be. So I want to be able to go up, back in. There it is, I can see it just popping in and out there. So if I look at that, that's the 120 height. No, there happen to be no trees actually wanting to spawn on there, but you can see they've started appearing now into the hills. Not okay. So yeah, just I guess all I'm trying to say is bear in mind that this height is a real value when you're actually setting your system, if you're unsure as to exactly where it needs to be. So I think 120 is pretty good. I might actually go 10 higher just to make sure. And I'm setting this get rid of that on here. So we're now, let's go now work scene, start. On the vegetation, so you're going to need to, so that's remembered from when we were in play mode. That's still okay. Oh no, actually that's the as part of the debugging I changed things over to our pre. Let's go back and use this one. Vegetation, so we'll go through each of those. Enable, enable, enable. They're all enabled again. Now, so I wanted my trees. It's remembered that one. That was the original. So check height. I want my trees to appear up to 130. And, 130. And, while I'm here, and remember noticing that, so if I look at that, so if I go up to 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, 130, that's fine. There were patches of grass also missing. I wonder if that's... Have a run on this. See if we're getting what we expect. So that's looking better. We've got trees in the distance again. So yeah, it's going up into the hills. Getting up in the hills on the left is one of the issues. Where the grass was disappearing. Up here. So I'm guessing this is to do with... So we're losing our grass. I'm guessing that's to do with the steepness value. Just looking at it. I think it's just thinking too steep for grass. So how do we work it out? Well, same as we did with the tree. Find the terrain tile, select it. Actually no, we're not even in that scene, so we can do it on here. And select the vegetation system. So what are we missing? We're missing most of our grass. Steepness is 35. What happens if we change that to something higher? So we 35. Zoom in a bit, make sure I've got... The other thing I could check is I know the plants. So this flower is appearing. I'll check its settings. So must include. Actually, it is on 35, so it might not be the steepness. It'll be something else. What's different about the grass? Exclude this texture. As if I deselect that. Yeah, okay, so there's a touch of that other texture, the rock texture that was being that was stopping it. It's because it's, I guess it's the start of the slope and the way that the Gaia terrain map was painted. It just has a little hint of rock under, and it's being picked up. So instead of this kind of confusing exclude and include, I'm just going to keep just the include. Where there is grass, let there be grass. So let me go through all of these other ones, make sure they're set as I want them to be. So grass, it's remembered that. I can actually delete it rather than go through. So don't use exclude. Using exclude. That's not using exclude. That's not using exclude. Okay, so I think that's going to be better now. Save my scene. Let's have another playthrough. Put that back. So yeah, so we spent all overnight baking our foliage, but I think it was getting a bit late last night when I was setting everything up, and I didn't really check it properly, so we've ended up baking rules or vegetation in not in all the places that we needed. So it is worth just spending a bit of time before you do that overnight build, or bake should I say, that things are appearing where you want them to. I think now we're good to go, but it's a good opportunity to show you, okay, so how do you alter, oh it's a weird, so the exclusion, yeah, that makes sense to me. The exclusion was very much saying, so you don't want any grass on this. You could add additional foliage here, so probably, in fact, I remember the Nature Manufacture package has this nice, where is it? Oh, no. Was it in details? Poplar leaves, I think. Yeah, so these nice poplar leaves. Oh, I'm not going to be able to drag it in to F. It's kind of foliage that you could put on. I might do that now, hey, while I'm here. So, first of all, get out of play mode. And I want to turn off. Which one am I going to use? They both look nice. I'll turn the shadows off on both. Go to my vegetation system. I'll go with 2, why not? I think it might be considered an object. And the important bit is I want terrain texture rule include, so it must include texture 3, which is the, let's go and have a look at that. Back to, should really move my starting point of the FPS controller to the player character to the place that I'm working on, rather than having to run down to it all the time. So I seem to remember going through these and then running up the hill and noticing that patch somewhere around these parts. Here we go, so we haven't got quite as much of that item as I thought we were going to get. So let me kind of, that's the spot. So for this, let's try a bit more. Something being spawned, but not quite what we're expecting. Let's try instance indirect. Well, that kind of threw it off. So a couple of things might be at stake. Scale seems okay. Position offset, so it's what happens if I make it a bit higher. Here we go. So it was just spawning just a little bit below, and now we've got, we have way too much, but it's giving a nice kind of texture to things, but maybe not exactly where we expect it to be. Let me change that to, so I did, that was 2, let me change that to 1, see if that's a slightly fresh prefab. Yeah, oh, give it a chance. Slightly more the kind of the look and the height that I'm expecting, but just slightly weirded out why it's appearing in some places. I definitely don't want it to be on the grass, but it's extending all the way to the grass. Let me work out why that is. So use include, let me use it, use exclude, see if that works. So I want it to be exclude texture 2, because I definitely don't want it to That's fine. What is this? Must be, what about Perlin noise? If I don't use Perlin noise, you're gonna go, yeah, okay, so it just happened to be that this area was being cut out by the Perlin noise size. Okay, so that's pretty good, and it's stopping where I expect it to stop, and it's giving some kind of texture to that area. Right, what do I want to do here? Just feels as if there's an awful lot of it and it's going over the top of the trees, which is not ideal. Now, there are ways of minimizing that. You have a look in scene. Where are we? Let's go on my controller. So oh, I freaked it out now. Okay, well that'll do. So make sure got my settings. Let's remember that. Let's remember the. Okay, and I just think there was just too much of it. The in terms of the. I'm going to reduce that a bit. Let's go back and have a look. Oh, here we go again. The long walk, a long run to the area we're thinking of. Through here. So remember, I've not put on any colliders. Or have I just gone past it? I guess it's not so apparent now. These bold spots are not so apparent because I've done some fixing. Here we go. It's not. It's spawning above. It's doing this weird spawning above the terrain. I can see it. It's my setting of 1 here. So it may be actually it's a size issue. I want a rotation on Y, yeah, I want to kind of just mess them around. So I want my scale. Seeing the things in scene view. I'm not sure actually because I'm expecting let's try doing it this way. Oh, that's better. So yeah, so it's not showing both in play mode and but in the editor you will. So okay, so now I can see the this height issue. What's this? So it's just a really subtle lift that it needs, but really just not much, because I can see just there's a kind of a okay, that looks good. So that's just going to add a little bit more detail to these empty areas. You might, you know, you can see it slightly better when you lift it up. It's not bad. It's just going to add that. I think I played around with that setting with that meaning to 15 and 1. So let's change that back 15 and 1. What's this one? Not sure if that's being spawned, to be honest, but it should be. So definitely include, do that turning off the polling noise, see if that, yeah, not quite. And I think I will turn that off because I want it to be quite a bit denser than we have been getting, so it's looking a bit better. Okay, that'll do. So we've updated the package. Essentially this, I'm gonna make that, so this is version 2 pre-bake. If you remember, once we bake, we'll lose they'll become disabled. It just makes it easier to get back if you need to. So we need to go back to our, it's actually the chunked one, and we got a choice. We can use this, rebake all, or you can literally delete everything and start again, so rebake from scratch, which is actually what I'm going to do for this one, because it's all not quite what I wanted it to be. So the first thing is look in this scene for vegetation system. Oh, go from the first one, delete them all. And then I'm going to go in here, delete them all. That's going to take a little bit of time. This is a lot of data in there. Remove that filter. So we've now got our terrain that are back to having just a terrain. I'm going to save the scene and bring in our new package. So we made a change, but we made a change to this. I'm going to bring that in. That's the package we want to bake, and all of that is good. So off we go. You sure you want to do it? Yeah, I do. And off it goes. It's going to take a while, same as before. We'll catch up when it's done. Okay, so second time lucky. So we're baked on our second lot, and again we've got this vegetation system's been added to all the slices, and in here we've got everything. If you remember, one of the things that I've found kind of helps is because initially it seems that these haven't updated from the whatever happens behind the scenes in the cache, so I tend to dirty the scene. Just grab something that's unrelated, change it one way, then change it back. In fact, you'll see this suddenly update. Save, and there it all is, all done. The scene's updated, so we're in our chunked scene with the world streamer scene splitter. We've updated the layer 4K scene, so we're gonna slice and generate. Running through each of, not the mesh obviously, but each of the terrain slices. Each scene's being updated and saved. Okay, nearly there. All done. And now I can go back into my play scene. So previously what I did is I did update the streamer. Oh no, this one, streamer in here, just pulled it in, but I honestly don't think you need to, because it's actually referencing the same scenes, it's just the content of the scenes that's changed. So I'm just gonna I'll do it from here, save us the build time just at first, just to make sure that it is working as I expect it. Loading in all the terrains, you can see that. Now we'll know it's worked if, as we walk past the forest into the next section, we start seeing the trees further up. So we're gonna, there's the grab, but yeah, there are trees in the distance. It's looking good. Okay, so we had this big looks much better. So we're not in a build, so we're getting, you know, every time that we're hitting the next tile loading up, that's looking good. Yeah, we got all our trees. Okay, so let's actually do the build and VS chunked. Yeah, that's what we want. We're going to go over it. Nearly there. 512 or 513 scenes to build, if you remember. 256 of the terrains, 256 of the mesh. Last bit. And we're good to go. Okay. So we're running at 173, well, minimum 173, about 200, and again I'm just running past the scene loads. I'm going to go into quite a densely and getting no lagging, although I'm seeing that -1 appear just in the min momentarily, but it just isn't lagging as I'm playing, as I'm running. Spot on. So I think pretty much mission accomplished, I would say. We've done our enjoying the, yeah, that's looking much better, and we got that slight detail of the additional leaves that we added, looking quite nice. I mean, you could obviously, you know, add more, make it look much better. I think it's really, the one thing it's really missing are rocks, and I think the other thing, the one thing that I talked about, which I think I'll add now, so one of the things that we did is we turned off the shadow casting on everything. But here's my, so this is NGSS, the contact shadows. So NGSS, let me try to pull it up for you. Have I opened it already? No, actually no I haven't. So next gen soft shadows, not stupidly priced actually, about €13, and so it does essentially replaces Unity's built-in shadows and includes a screen space contact shadow, which is what we'll use on the grass. So I've added that. You can tweak it in play mode. So I'm going to find somewhere that it kind of looks okay. So turn it off. I've not given it the direction I like. That's it. Oh, ouch. Mega settings. So shadow softness, shadow fade. So the more samples, the heavier it is on your performance. You can see it kind of deteriorating a bit as you're kind of pulling down. So actually with this I need it to be shadowed. Actually no. A bit too heavy for some reason. I think it's just taking, and possibly I'm expecting that it also related to the intensity. Oh no, don't do that. does pick up on it's getting, it's not perfect, but it's kind of doing the job that I wanted to. So if you turn it off, you leave it on this bit that makes, that's without, that's with, it's not, but that's without, that's on. I think this just, I think the thing is the edge. I seem to remember the edge tolerance. Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, you know, we've got the sun to our back. Let's move that sun a little bit. So, I mean, make a copy of this, because we're in play mode, if you remember. Paste, component values, go back in play mode, and let's mess around with that sun. We're kind of at a crazy midday. Remember, with very harsh. I think we just need some post-processing effect, to be honest. I think that's what we're, let's undo that. Okay, we're at the post-processing stage. We need a behavior. So have we got any that we can pick up? Not sure which demo that is. That's the Aquas one. Default, custom. I was hoping more for see what the Aquas one is like. Oh, it's got loads of. Let's pick it up on here. So don't want any of that. Mega bloom. Blur will help. Definitely need anti-aliasing. So actually, with all of that going on, maybe we don't need this. Fade. Okay, let's just leave it at that and see. Not massively impressed though with the version 2. They must be some that I've worked on, because they must be a version. Let me try just changing those instead. They're not accepted because that's actually version 2, as in the post-processing snack version 2. That's what that is. Surprised the Gaia doesn't have any post. There they are. Well, they version 2. It's not too happy. Object not set to an instance. I'm going to do the ring. Not at all happy. Ditto on that. Okay. Okay, so sorry, interruption aside, back to doing a PostFX on this. So I was getting errors. Oh, here we go. From the Gaia post-processing. I said I don't know what it is in here, but it always, I kind of remember what the error was. So yeah, if I go with 2, you'll see the error because I fixed one now. So it's the dithering component. I don't know what it is about their dithering, but as soon as you turn it off, then you're good to go. So actually I'm not sure I like 1 so much. I think 1 is a bit full on, but I'm going to go with 2. I'm going to go with 1. Here I am. And actually maybe I'll make a copy because I want to keep my originals. Let's go in here and do some fixes. How the vignetting, bit much maybe for me, yeah. And the ambient occlusion, yeah. Depth of field, bloom is always a bit much, but that's fine. The colour grading's quite nice. And I wish I knew more about how to set these up. That all looks straight down the line now. I'm not sure if there's much going on, but after, so it's just added. They're just kind of shifting things here. Well, I'll go with that. What's the anti-aliasing? Temporal. So temporal doesn't work correctly when MSAA is enabled. Have I got MSAA enabled? Yeah. Turn that off. Turn on HDR. Whoa. I think, you know, having added this. No, it's not as natural, but it adds some contrast. It's just that it's not usually quite so. It's not usually quite so harsh. No, I can't work out why. I'm just going to make it really, really subtle. Still feels a bit harsh in those harsh shadows. It must be to do with something with the way that eye is positioned. Who knows? Just feeling as if it's really, really. Does that have any impact? No. There is a kind of a fade option. So that's just, yeah, I don't remember seeing it that harsh. And there's no like on off, it's just is. To do with that? Ah. Maybe. Here we go, feels a bit better. So the distance is away from, that's kind of okay. That's feeling a little bit better. Shadow fade. And I feel as if I'm picking some very extreme values. Walk around. Definitely helps. It's just wow. I wish I could just fade it out a little more, you know. But hey, it's going to go with that. Yeah, that works for me. Okay. Copy. Now, if you don't do it already, you might have noticed my editor is, well, red, pink when I'm in play mode. I mean, hopefully it's a pretty known trick, but if you don't know it, it's to remind you that you're in play mode, and it's set in project settings. Is it? No, in preferences, color. Is it? You'll find it. Colors, scene, background. Play mode tint. Sorry, it took me a while to remember exactly where it was. Play mode tint. Just set that to a tint of whatever is different, so that when you're in play mode, let me save that. You know that you're in there. So, okay, so it's kind of starting to look good, although I think the colour's gone. Which effect were we using? Ah, it's defaulted back to, was it 1? Too much? No. Oh. I feel as if I made lots of changes and they haven't been picked up. That's way too. Okay, let me go back. So I'm on 3. 3. Go. Oh no, that's okay. Okay, so it's kind of looking better. But this depth of field, the depth of field might actually save us in terms of these issues of these background. You could, I guess. What have we got? 3, 2, 1. Use cap. Oh no, that's why it's not. That's the close. get it to go out of focus in the distance. That's the, whoa. So there's the distance, but I want it to be more close. And then widen that. And then let's make that less. I'm not sure what the kernel. Not sure when that, how that affects performance would be my main issue, but I think I quite like what I've got, but I just want to make it just a little bit more subtle. Okay. Right. File. Where's our save? Let's do a quick build. And I want to see now if I'm, essentially if I'm keeping my performance high, because as soon as you start adding post effects, that starts to hit your performance. So it's in terms of the headroom that I've got, what happens next, how much can I add, am I going to try Enviro for volumetric lighting. Gaia's works really well with Aura, might add Aura, possibly Aura and not Enviro, ideally both if I could get away with it. I've done a lot of cutting corners where I can, so I'm hoping that I can, you know, make the most of that. It's a bit like being slightly quiet and pensive, just because it's the anticipation. Am I going to get away with it? You know, that kind of feeling. And you can really only find out by building. You're not going to know in the editor. You've got to build it, you've got to play it as a here we come. If we've done the post-processing, I'm not sure if it kind of remembered my kind of more subtle settings, but oh god, yeah, no, I don't like that at all. I'm so distracted by the field of view that I'm kind of ignoring the actual how it plays. But yeah, no, it's still super smooth. Like you can see the spikes as they're coming down the profiler, but they're not. Well, actually, did I just feel a slight lag? Concentrate on. Oh, I lost my trees. I think again it's to do with my height. I think what I've done is I've said that I'm going, I can feel myself going, yeah, up, and I have a feeling that the height is just too, the setting for the height is not right. Let's go back down into the valleys. We'll be can get some trees down there. Trees can be quite yeah, it is a height thing. The trees just stop after a certain height. Nice, really nice. I'm enjoying. Okay, I mean, I think that's the beauty. Once you've got something that you feel nice and you can walk around and explore, and you stop actually thinking about the lagging, unless it really becomes a proper issue. So yeah, so there's, you could see those scenes just loading in the spikes. I would say, you know, pretty much job done. I set out initially to show you the kind of issues that you would have to think about, some of the tricks and techniques that you would need to use. I think the biggest mistake that I've made is to have such a wide open scene. Oh, I'm going into the sun. Because of the sight lines being huge. But having said that, I think you can mitigate against that. I think, let me stop a second, that transition between, get this, between the foliage and the pure terrain, and not even beginning to mention the billboards of the trees, that kind of disparity in the dark tint, so lighter tint of the billboards, but you could fix that in Vegetation Studio. But as I said, using Megasplat, I've been told that you can actually do what VS Pro does, what Vegetation Studio does, which is to overlay essentially a texture of what your grass would look like on top of it. So I think that'll be the next thing that I want to explore. But for a test terrain, you know, just for pointing to in the right direction of the kind of things that you might want to be starting to think about as you're working on streaming a large open world terrain. I think I've done a pretty good job, and I think probably if I were you, I would stop there and do it yourself. Give it a go. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to possibly do a new terrain and learn a few more things as I run through. But I'll leave it at that for now. And I hope you enjoyed this kind of slightly up and down, long-winded presentation. It I think possibly felt a little bit more like a Twitch stream at times, apart from the fact that I had to stop and start because of the baking. Any questions, post in the comments, or get in touch with me on one of the Discords. I'll leave links to the ones that I would recommend as good sources of information. Thanks again.